This is Tamar. I don't hear any sound from anybody in the chamber. Can anybody hear me?
Hi, Tamara. We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yep, that is fantastic. Thank you.
Mile High City.
Recording in progress.
Good evening. I'll call to order the October 12th, 2023 meeting of the Louisville Planning Commission with a roll call, please.
Commissioner Basket.
That's
Here.
Basket.
Yep. Commissioner Choi.
Here.
Commissioner Osterman.
Here.
Commissioner Moline.
Here.
Commissioner Howe.
Here.
And Commissioner Krantz.
Here remotely.
Yep. And
Got
Chair
it.
Brown Eyes.
Here. Thank you. If I have a motion to approve this evening's agenda, please.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Looking at the August minutes, does anybody have any corrections they want to make with the group? Seeing none, can somebody double check to make sure that Tamara's not raising her hand on this one? Tamara, did you have any corrections to the minutes?
No, I did not.
No? Okay, thank you. Motion to approve August 2023 minutes.
I'll move approval of the August 2023 minutes.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Open it for public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Again, here, if somebody could look at the Zoom for me. None. Seeing none, we'll move in. We have one item of continued business this evening, the East Street Village preliminary plat and preliminary PUD. I will now reopen the public hearing on a request for a preliminary plat and preliminary PUD. The purpose of the hearing is to receive evidence regarding the application materials and provide a public forum for all interested parties who wish to comment on this request before the Planning Commission. The procedure for the public hearing will be as follows. We'll have brief recap presentations by city staff, and we will have a brief recap presentation by the applicant. After these presentations, members of the public who have joined this meeting in person, by computer, or telephone may speak regarding the application. Anyone who would like to speak is asked to complete a speaker card, use the raise hand function if participating by computer, or *9 if calling in by telephone. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes per person. Pooling of comments is not permitted. The Purpose of public comment is to receive public testimony and not a forum for debate or dialogue. Commenters are encouraged to raise pertinent issues and may ask questions for clarity. However, these questions will not be directly answered during the public comment period. The applicant and staff will then be allowed to make a closing statement. I will then close the public hearing and no further testimony or other evidence will be received unless the commission decides to reopen the hearing. The planning commission will discuss the matter and may approve with conditions, deny, or continue it to a future meeting. Public hearings are recorded for the public record. All testimony must be presented after stating your name and city of residence. Jumping right back into the staff presentation. Recap, please. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. My name's Ellie Hassan. I'm Planner 2 with the City of Louisville. And as a recap for this item was continued from the September 14th, 2023 meeting. And a brief summary is that this is a preliminary plat and PUD for 36 residential units, which are a mix of single-family detached and single-family townhomes. And the property itself is along East Street, south of the Pine Street Plaza property. And through our analysis, staff found that the application meets the criteria in the municipal code, both for the planned unit development and for the subdivision, with requested waivers. And staff does support and does find that this proposal supports policies in the 2013 comprehensive plan. Staff therefore recommended approval of Resolution 17, Series 2023, which recommends approval of a preliminary subdivision plat and preliminary PUD for 15 single-family and 21 townhome units on a 3.6 acre parcel, which is located at 421, 533, and 565 East Street. And one thing that I did want to update you with between the previous hearing and this one is that we did receive two public comments for this project, both in support of the project. And the third document that you see up there was provided by the applicant, and they do wish to add that into the public comment. It's basically a letter from them requesting the proposal to be approved. One thing to note too is I did recognize that the chair did have questions about what the resolution was for HPC regarding the demolition of the existing buildings on these properties. And we did go through and find that staff recommended a demolition with no stay. And the commission did approve this, and that was back in July of 2023. And that concludes our staff briefing, and I'm here for any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of staff at this time, or we'll be able to come back? We're not going to be closing public hearing just yet.
Chairman,
so.
I have just a few
Oh,
questions.
yeah, please, go ahead.
Thanks. A question on the 10-foot sanitary sewer easement vacation. What's the status? Is there any updates to the status of the city ordinance to approve the easement vacation?
So the easement vacation for the sewer easement will happen during the final plat process.
Okay.
And it will be noted on there with to be vacated, and we'll record it concurrently.
Okay, thank you. And then I have another question. There's a wood fence on the perimeter. Were there any other materials that were considered for this? I know this is a small piece of information regarding the whole proposal.
From my understanding with the specs that the applicant provided, I think at this stage they are doing a wood fence along the perimeter.
We can ask the applicant more about that if you want to, but that's what they've proposed, yes. Anything additional at this time? Commissioner Baskett.
I don't know if you know this detail, but in the application, there's a reference to a multi-use path, I believe between the businesses and the edge of the property line for this proposed development. Is that in the city's adopted plan somewhere, or what? Do you know any more about that?
And just to clarify, is this the multi-use path on the west or east side of the property?
On the west side of the property.
West side. I would have to come back to you with more information on where we stand with that, but we would definitely iron out some details for it later on in the process.
All right, thank you.
No questions of staff at this time? Oh, go ahead, yeah.
I don't know if this is the right time to get into it or not. I wanted to have more staff discussion around the intersection of Pine and East Street and what the traffic study says. So,
Yeah, sure.
So traffic study was mind-boggling, 100 pages long. So I looked at some of the traffic counts and I looked at the conclusions from that study. I just wondered, staff having gone through it, if you feel confident that we're going to create a safe condition with adding the vehicle trips from the development to that intersection.
Yeah, from my understanding, it looked as though there weren't any major concerns in the traffic impact study that I could see for that intersection, but I do have it up right now. And it does look like the level of service is a C, if I'm reading this correctly. So, or that's for Lock Street. I apologize. It'll be a B as in Bravo level of service from what they're predicting in 2025, and then in 2045, they're predicting it to stay at B. So from what staff could tell in the impact study, it looks like it should meet what we're looking for.
And maybe I'll just add, so I think there was a question about safety. So there aren't any, I would just add, I don't believe there are any pedestrian, bicycle improvements proposed for that intersection. Is that correct? So I think, our Public Works Department reviewed it. They didn't have any comments about safety, just to add that. We haven't really looked at PED improvements on that intersection in relation to improvements related to this project. Part of that might be the Highway 42 study. We expect will influence how that intersection gets configured as well. So we weren't anticipating that this development would contribute to those safety improvements.
Director Zakar, I'm wondering if you know, there's a reference in the public comment to a new crosswalk that was recently added, I think right at Pine and East Street. Do you know anything about that, if that's created?
I don't think it's a crosswalk, it's cross-hatching. That is a big
Oh, to
area
keep people out
across
of
there. Yeah.
don't
Don't block the intersection.
Yeah.
I'm not real familiar with that. I do know that's out there. It's for business access in and out, because that does back up during peak hour for that private driveway to be blocked. So I think that, this project, I don't think has vehicular access directly at that location, and they can go south to get in and out and avoid that intersection as well, which I would anticipate, that might be the way the residents actually go, especially during peak hour. It might be easier to get out to go to the south.
Well, I'm not concerned about a level of service B. I find that to be acceptable. And I understand that this intersection is not directly adjacent to the development. It's the tipping point of how much traffic do you add to it before something has to happen. So I think we need to keep an eye on that location.
Right, thank you, Commissioner.
Any additional questions at this time? Seeing none, I'd like to invite the applicant up for Tamara has one.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Tamara.
Thank you.
Commissioner Krantz.
Yeah, I just had a question because in the applicant presentation last week, they mentioned that with regard to the public land dedication, that they spoke to public works. And I don't remember the words, but maybe it was too small to be worth putting in a park or open space. But I'm wondering if they spoke to Parks Board or Open Space Board.
I don't believe they have gone to any of the Parks and Open Space boards, but we do have members of the Parks and Rec Department who do review the applications, and it was sent to them on referral. I don't recall any comments specifically about that, but I would have to double check and see if there were any concerns.
Thank you. I would be interested in knowing that.
Any additional questions, Commissioner Krantz? All right, seeing none then, I'd like to re-invite the applicant up for a recap, please.
Hey, good evening. I'm Andy Johnson. I'm with DAJ Design here in Louisville. I'm both a resident and business owner here in Louisville. I'm going to be accompanied by Paul Norquist, as well as Bobby Steer as part of the team. I'll go ahead and introduce them now. They're both from the Denver area, Bobby Broomfield, and they will identify themselves when they do come to the up to speak. So. Thank you again for having us here. Sorry that we had an abbreviated version of this at the beginning. I think it did offer us some ability to think about this over the last month, and also have the opportunity to read the final report of the housing study, which I think is valuable. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to read it. It's really good. With that, we'll get started. So we talked about the location of the project within Louisville. Obviously, its relationship to downtown, its proximity to Highway 42 and 95th, and then also how it's bordered by the railroad on the west side. Within the context of a zoning diagram in Louisville, it is adjacent to the CC zoning district, which is primarily what we know as our downtown area, and then surrounded also by the RM zoning district. This project is in the RM zoning district, as I mentioned the last time. The RM zoning district is a fairly predominant zoning district within Old Town, as we had talked about last time. The basis for our code was from 1962. It did lay the groundwork for our current RM and RL zoning districts. Major updates to our zoning code were in 1973, which did formalize the RM zoning district, and has largely remained untouched since that time. The RM zoning district set bulk and size standards that nearly put half of Old Town, so existing Old Town Louisville, into a legal but non-conforming status. So basically, a lot of our properties within Old Town actually don't even comply with our RM zoning district. That set the stage for a no growth, no change mindset in an effort to prevent the character of Louisville from being altered. Of course, that was then. I think there's been some similarity in those feelings over the years. The RM zoning district allows for a 3,500 square foot per unit, or 3,500 square foot per dwelling unit metric, and East Street has now a max allowance of 37 units. Based on our lot size, we proposed 36 units. Working with the RM zoning district code, a proposed site plan, as shown in the slide, yields pretty suboptimal kind of suburban design with large lots, allowing for larger, more expensive homes. Obviously, there are probably different iterations of this with different outcomes, all of them mostly yielding larger homes, more expensive properties, and in an area of town that seems a little out of character for that kind of development. Project history. We did not touch on this last time, and I feel like it's an important thing to talk about. This project started in combination with a redevelopment of the Pine Street Plaza site as well. So with that, what the ownership decided to do with the East Street Village was to try to marry their project with the East Street or the Pine Street Plaza development. There was a fairly substantial talk around an East Street realignment, which would take that curved road and how it intersects Pine Street into a different configuration, hopefully creating a safer and a more kind of compelling way of moving from Pine Street onto East Street. You can see on the left of the slide is an early version of what that development looked like. I think what's highlighted by talking about the history of this project is that the design team has been very focused in trying to adapt to whatever seems to be the best and highest use for this property in relationship to other developments and also the city of Louisville. So what's highlighted in red was this kind of extension of like a second Main Street that would go onto the East Street Village property and then eventually down to East Street. Different iterations. Early option 1 on the left. This is with north facing up in this case. So it's a little bit of a reorientation of your view. Shows that realignment of East Street. It also shows that continuation of East Street onto the East Street Village property. Looking at the consideration of a rezoning of this property, allowing some mixed-use residential, introducing some commercial into this project. Unfortunately, within 4 to 5 months of working on this type of development, the Pine Street Plaza development ended, and so ownership was forced to redesign, relook at the project, and so early option 2 is a kind of a first iteration of what ended up kind of turning into that final product. So unfortunately, there was a realignment of the priorities and what to do with the East Street Village property. So option 2 is that first redevelopment opportunity, which turned into this project that you have been looking at. So this is a color-coded version, gives you a sense of buildings, green space, as well as the infrastructure that's going to be in place. So I think just to reiterate what is important in terms of the comprehensive plan, this project consists of smaller blocks, smaller parcels, and lots with street-facing orientation, all things specifically out of the 2013 comprehensive plan. Walkable distance to downtown, which is inherent by its location within Louisville, of course, and then will hopefully be enhanced by the Highway 42 improvements, which I believe will hopefully be forthcoming soon. And most importantly, offers more rooftops in support of businesses adjacent to properties in downtown. We have a struggling downtown. We have struggling areas, pockets within Louisville, McCaslin Corridor, South Boulder Road. All of these need a reinvigoration, and people are a great way to do that. So neighboring developments, we looked at compatibility, and this is sort of the benefit of having had us start on this and then able to think about some of the important things we want to talk about. The neighboring developments, particularly Sunnyside and Clementine, are particularly relevant to this property. East Street has many similarities to these. Sunnyside was approved in 1999. Clementine Commons, as some of you may remember, was approved in 2018. Sunnyside is 1.23 acres and added 17 affordable units in the form of 4 duplexes, 1 triplex, and 1 sixplex. Clementine is 3.6 acres, very similar to the East Street Village size, and added 42 market rate townhouse units. It's all townhouses. East Street is 3.6, and we are adding 36 units. So looking at the location of East Street Village and then in relationship to its neighboring communities, I have a side-by-side comparison of 2 scaled site plans of each development. And I think this is particularly relevant to the discussion of compatibility and also size comparison of the projects, which Clementine and Sunnyside obviously were approved. Clementine seemed to be approved enthusiastically. The comparison of buildings, definitely notice that the sizes of the townhouses are similar. The ones of East Street Village are quite a bit narrower than what Clementine offers. The individual single-family homes have a lot of similarity to the north units along Clementine. Both quality products. I think Clementine was a great development. So by showing it, I'm really complimenting it as well as showing the comparisons. One of the things that Clementine was able to do that East Street Village and Sunnyside were both not able to do is that they were able to leverage their stormwater detention off-site on a city-owned parcel that ended up becoming kind of like a city park. And if you look at the size of Clementine's detention pond, it's sizable. It's shallow in certain parts as you go north, but it's a fairly big part of what would have taken up a lot of green space on that property. So they had a very unique and fortuitous opportunity. When you look at East Street by comparison, so East Street's detention ponds, when they are placed on the Clementine site, they are nearly the size of that open common area. Pointing out that it is more difficult for the East Street Village property to accommodate that kind of commonplace. I know that we started kind of an open space discussion that we didn't get to finish. It was mostly in questions to staff, but wanted to just point out that relationship. Also, what you see are the property boundaries of East Street Village overlaid over Clementine, as well as the Sunnyside development overlaid on Clementine to give you a relationship of all of these sites and the different opportunities that each one offers. There was a lot of suggestion early on with the East Street Village to have similarities to Clementine, and so I think showing this diagrammatically is an important step. In comparison to Sunnyside, also to scale, one of the things to note is that they do have a little bit of open green space. It is a fairly simple kind of drive aisle and parking. Their green space is their detention pond. So if you look at the aerial photo, you'll see the inlets located within that area. Okay, so one thing that I felt was done effectively well before our meeting the last month were neighborhood meetings. I touched on it last time, but I did want to get into just a little more detail very briefly. We did do a series of neighborhood meetings and then also had subsequent individual meetings in person, through email, on the phone, and we were available pretty much the whole time to those that had questions, concerns. Individual meetings and the group meetings included the Pine Street Plaza ownership, American Legion, E-Bike of Colorado, and Mr. Crancy, as well as the residential neighbors across the tracks and just due to the south. Primarily across the tracks, that is full of rental properties. And so we did specifically talk to the one landowner that was pretty directly adjacent to the property. And you've received a letter today of his wanting to hopefully have you move forward with an approval. The concerns that were brought up were primarily revolving around the north property line as it impacts the businesses that are adjacent, particularly with outdoor patios and its proximity to housing. You also received a letter from the Pine Street Plaza owner stating that there is existing housing there. His concerns are somewhat quelled around that issue. And then neighborhood residential concerns were primarily around landscaping, since that is fairly dense with volunteer trees along their tracks. They were interested in what that landscaping would look like, and so we shared that information. Generally, all the neighbors are supportive of this development, as demonstrated with the letters. Housing needs. So great timing on the final report. As I said, very well done. A couple highlights at the end that I thought really stood out to me. The housing needs assessment indicated that 2,483 new homes were needed in the next 25 years. That equates to basically 96 units per year from here moving forward. That is a lot of units when we are going one by one in Old Town and various redevelopment sites with very limited ability to find greenfield or even brownfield sites to add quite a bit of housing. 47% of those homes are to be 120 to 140% plus AMI, which equates 1,151 homes. 37% of those homes are to be 80% AMI or below AMI, which equates to 928 homes. And I think all of those statistics are very interesting. I think what is a little, frustrating from a development perspective right now is that we have an ordinance that was approved in 2021 It states 12% of dwelling units shall be affordable within a market rate development. Design materials equivalent to market rate units. It doesn't go into a whole lot more detail in terms of what creativity can be done within that. It's very straightforward. Right now, we don't have a recorded, established administration of the inclusionary housing ordinance. There's lots of talks about how that'll happen, and I think hopefully this housing needs assessment and the housing study will generate that and will generate our actual policy of what we want to do with housing in Louisville. Right now, it's difficult for a small development to incorporate inclusionary housing at a 12% rate when there's no degree of within that or creativity of how to do that. And it's also difficult to really do a pro forma accurately without the actual numbers. So we use the numbers that we have available to us, which is old data from Boulder County Housing. So we are proposing a fee in lieu. It is well known that these funds are important. They are an important driver to create meaningful, affordable housing within partnerships of other entities, particularly nonprofit CDCs, grant funding from the state and national level. It adds to the ability to actually create more units as opposed to 1s, 2s, 4s, 5s, as opposed to doing dozens. From there, I'm gonna invite Paul up. He's gonna run through a few things real quick, and then we'll end with Bobby. So,
good evening. I'm Paul Norquist with Design Practice. We are the architectural design team on this project.
Your city of...
Oh, sorry, we're from Denver. So I just wanted to recap from Ellie's presentation last week, and we've gone over it, but the project and the reason for the PUD is we are requesting a number of waivers. I know we've gone over and we can discuss them a little more if we need to, but there are waivers for lot size, lot coverage, setbacks, and building heights as shown in the tables here. We'll go a little more into the design of the site and the design of the unit. So the site's laid out with single family units to be on the north and the south, which are adjacent to our neighboring property lines. East obviously being East Street and west being the railroad right-of-way. And then oriented the 21 townhomes, which are the denser, slightly bulkier buildings towards the center of the site. So what that does is creates a little bit of buffer should the Pine Street Plaza development, if that should get developed, we anticipate that being a denser development. That property line isn't as much a concern as possibly what could happen to the south if the neighbors to the south should ever decide to redevelop or rebuild on those sites. So by creating a little more porous property line and putting the density in the middle, we felt it was a little more friendly to the neighborhood in that respect. We do have the city-owned property to the north, which ranges from about 17 feet 6 inches from property line to property line on the east side, and it's about 22 feet wide. So the city owns that sort of, it's not really a triangle, but widening piece of land between us and the American Legion and Pine Street Plaza property, creating a little additional buffer. Additionally, to the south, the two parcels to the south, they do have a 30-foot utility easement on the north side of their property, currently creating a buffer. Not that that easement couldn't be vacated and those utilities rearranged at some point, but in the existing condition, that's where they are. But those are sort of the drivers for how the site ended up as it is. These just highlight sort of those two. We have 8 single families on the north, 7 on the south, and then the 21 townhomes in the middle. The single family unit type 1, which are our smaller footprint single families, these are the 7 on the south there, and then 4 of the ones on the north. These are intended to be or they are designed as 3-bedroom, 2-bath above grade. They're about 2,400 square feet with an attached 2-car garage. They'll have about a 900 square foot basement space, which will be an option to finish at this, whether the developer at this time decides to finish them pre-sale or do a builder option. That yet remains to be seen. But relatively smaller footprints. These are 1,500 square foot footprint. Again, with a 973 square foot main level. The upper level being slightly larger, we're recognizing the efficiency of building over the entire structure from a structural standpoint. But it gives us a little additional, since the ground floors are small by comparison, it gives us a little additional common open space in the loft above. The second single family type, and these are the additional 4 on the north side of the property. These are designed, one of the owner's primary drivers behind this project was to be able to build some main level primary suite units for the possibility of aging in place. They see a real need for this type of development. Without large tracts of land, it's hard to build ranch homes. So it's the idea of taking that idea of a ranch where you can have complete living on a main level, but put it into proximity, walkability to a downtown core. So these units have a larger footprint at 978 square feet, but relatively they're actually above grade square footage very similar to the other units at a total above grade of 2441. So the main floor of this unit, which is the middle diagram here, all of the amenities necessary for living. So should someone be aging in place or just want to live on one level, perhaps empty nesters that their kids will come back every now and then, it's all available. Nice primary suite, kitchen, dining, living area, laundry, powder room, and a 2-car garage. To keep the square footages down above, on this particular product, we have narrowed the upper level just to be a 2-bedroom, 2-bath additional upper level. And then these will have unfinished basement under the main living level, just obviously not the garage. The townhomes, as far as the design, let me talk a little bit about the design. They're all designed with this sort of a modern farmhouse or a modern mining shed in mind. It's a very simple, clean design, very clean lines, low overhangs, steeply pitched roofs, clean materials, and clean corners. So we're not trying to over-articulate the exteriors of the building. We're letting the building and the materials do the work for that. So the townhome units, which were in the middle of the site there's 21 of these. They're separated into 6 buildings. So there's 3 triplex buildings and 3 quadplex buildings. Each of the buildings has obviously 2 end units. We're calling those our type A units. And then the quadplexes will have 2, and the triplexes will have a single type B center unit. These are all designed with the garages to be detached. The detached garage allows for a small private living space or outdoor living space between the unit and the garage. So each of the units has its own backyard space. So these units are fairly typical, very similar to, if you've looked at any other townhome design that's kind of gone on in the last number of years, including if you go back to sort of the brownstone looks or the brownstones of Boston and New York. You have a main floor living, occupying kitchen, dining, and living area. The second floor is our bedroom level. The end units, because of the additional light, they'll have 3 smaller bedrooms and 2 baths. The middle units, since the center space does not have an egress component, that just becomes a loft, and they have 2 bedrooms at the ends of the units, and again, 2 bath. The end units currently, as they're designed, have a small enclosed rooftop space, that's up in the gable form of the end units, and then an exterior deck. The center units will, the roof level will just all be exterior deck. And then they have the stairs to a doghouse to access that deck. As a reference, scale-wise, sorry, these units, the type A in units are 2,300, 2,372 above grade, and the center units are 1,928 square feet above grade. Just as Andy was talking about in reference to Clementine, those units ranged from about 1,950 square feet above grade to about 2,400 square feet above grade. So very similar comparison size-wise. The basements. So the garden level of these units currently is proposed. Each of the units has an additional bedroom, bathroom, and either a rec or additional living space. We'd originally thought of these as a possibility of additional living space for either a tenant, a college student that's come back, or post-college living with parents. So the in units are designed with an exterior entry. The center units, we don't have that option, so that'll be connected to the unit itself. But originally we had thought of these as the unit on the left, the end units is the one on the left, where these could be separated from the townhouse unit above. They would be under single ownership, but it would then act as a 2-bedroom, 1-bath rentable apartment unit in the base. We understand that there is no ADU provision in Louisville right now, so that was pulled out of the project as we move forward. But I thought it was important to show that this is a conversion that could happen to these should that ordinance be adopted, and it gives the owner some flexibility on how to use that space. It was also a large driver on why the units are raised up above grade as much as they are, to allow as much light as we could down into those garden level spaces. We touched on this last week quickly. Parking, each of the units has 2-car garage attached with it. In addition, there's an additional 24 parking spaces, surface parking spaces provided. And lastly, just from scale-wise, we put together this rendering of what the East Street Village project as designed would look like from Highway 42 versus the trails at Clementine currently looks like from Highway 42. So from a massing standpoint, they're fairly similar. Ours is a little denser in the middle as we concentrate our townhomes, but we're also a little more porous on the edges with the single-family homes. So. With that, do you want me to introduce you, or? I'll bring up Bobby Steer from TSC Capital, and he just has a quick statement.
Good evening. My name is Bobby Steer. I'm in Broomfield. Jesse Truman, who couldn't be here tonight, he lives on the edge of Louisville. He and I are both invested in this development, and we manage the ownership group as well. I just wanted to highlight a quick bullet point from the letter that was sent out today. So the townhome units have been designed to give the residents private backyards and will have finished basements that could serve as tremendous option for cost-effective housing in the future. If Louisville passes an ADU resolution, currently on the council's work plan, there are 12 townhomes with exterior entrances leading to garden level living spaces that would be easily converted into low-cost rental units. Not only would that create 12 potential low-cost rental units, it would also allow 12 Louisville residents to earn income that makes their home more affordable by offsetting their mortgage. We have been advised by staff to leave these affordable units out of the PUD application and bring them forward at a later date, post-ADU approval, if the ordinance were to receive a successful vote. In the meantime, we have agreed to pay the fee in lieu for affordable housing, which most municipalities prefer to use that fee in lieu money in order to couple it with partnerships and grant funding to create more meaningful inclusionary housing. In essence, the city of Louisville will be a double beneficiary of this design, should an ADU ordinance pass and the project is prepared to increase its density by providing the necessary parking to support the 12 new units. We appreciate your consideration with this. Thanks for your time, and we will open up for questions now.
Great. Questions for the applicant? Who'd like to, Commissioner Basket?
I'm wondering what the size of the backyards are approximately in the single-family units and in the townhomes.
I don't know if that's setback exhibits in this. This one doesn't have the actual numbers, but on the north side, on the type B, or type 2 single families that have the primary suite on the main level, those from back of house to the property line is approximately 12 to 15 feet. On the type 1 units, it's about 27 feet on the north side. And on the south side, it staggers from about 15 feet on the easternmost home to about 22 to 24 feet on the westernmost home.
So some quick multiplication with the width. How many square feet does that land us at? So
Looks like about 250.
15 times 20.
So Chair, we can put, if you give us just a minute, we'll pull up some actual measurements that you can see here.
okay. I mean, I think we're pretty close, but yeah, that's great.
Okay.
If you have the actuals. Please continue.
They kind of connect my questions and comments. So then, how do you envision the space between the townhomes and the detached garages? How is that finished out?
It's going to be, I think we would leave it up to the individual owners to do what they would want, whether they hardscape it and put a small seating area and fireplace, whether they want a small sodded area for pets, whether they want a small vegetable garden. It would really be up to them to determine.
On the townhomes, those appear to be about, well, we'll get numbers here, but half the size of a two-car garage.
Yeah, they're also about 15 feet from face of structure to face of garage.
Okay.
And then those are narrower, the narrowest one being, I think, is 19.6. So.
I do like the way you provided for the open space with the south to north orientation, so it should be lit most of the year. And I think that the internal circulation is conducive to walking your dog around in a circle around the whole lot. I can envision people using the space in the configuration you've laid out.
I think it was really driven around the circular drive and having looked at a variety of ways to enter the site. And part of it came from when we were working with the group that was looking at developing Pine Street Plaza. But we had a couple of single entry options that created, for fire department safety, would create a cul-de-sac. And then we were teeing off of those for drive aisles, but the efficiency and we ended up with way more concrete than we would like. And so this was the most efficient method, and the lot's oriented the way the lot's oriented based on that efficiency.
Thank you very much.
Would you like to see the measurements now? We can.
Yeah,
pull
that'd
that
be
up.
great. If you could share those with us, that'd be appreciated.
Yeah, let me zoom in a little bit here, but this is just an approximation. But for the lots on the north, it looks like the type 1 units have about a give or take 1,100 square foot yard. The type 2 units have about 580-ish square feet. The smallest lot that we could find had about 420, but the other two numbers are more accurate for what I would consider to be the average, just based on the lot orientations.
Do you have anything on the townhomes? Or can we look at those?
Yeah, let me double check on those measurements. It'll just take a sec. So that's going to be a little less than 300 square feet for the townhomes.
Thank you.
Yeah, around there.
Great. Thanks. Commissioner Choi?
You all did a fair amount of outreach. You engaged different groups, adjacent residents and property owners. Can you talk about the process that you went through and any development discussions that you had with the fire department specifically?
Okay, thanks. Yes, so early on in every project, we do outreach directly with the fire marshal and had a number of one-on-one code-related discussions with them. The drive aisles specifically were dictated by the fire marshal, so they grew by around 3 feet for each drive aisle. A lot of that's based on building height, but a lot of it also is with some of their new turning radius templates. They have, as you probably know, a little more gear on the front now to make those turning radii. So Marshall Mestis and Paul and I worked through a lot of that, and also were provided new turning templates for the civil engineer to do fire access plans.
Okay.
Yeah. And then of course they are a referral source for
Right.
the PUD.
Did the conversation that you had and dialogues extend beyond the drive aisles to the overall site layout for the individual units and townhomes?
In what way?
Was the layout that's presented, was that informed at all by those discussions in terms of where those units were placed and the orientation and everything else outside of just the drive aisles?
Not so much the layout. It was primarily around access. There was a strong preference to having circular access through the site as opposed to having dead ends.
Am I reading it correctly also that you are identifying just currently the 2 hydrants within the development? Or 3, I'm sorry. One on the northeast corner, one on the northwest corner, and then one kind of on the south drive aisle?
Correct. Those are reviewed and advised by the fire department.
Thank you.
Just adding on to the questions about the U-shaped street that goes through the development, is that 2 lanes, so traffic going in both directions? Yeah.
It's similar to a wide alley. If you're in a 2-way parking lot where there's 90-degree parking on both sides. So it's not the width of a right-of-way for a street, but they're private streets, so it's the required width, so cars can pass one another going both directions. It will not be a one-way loop, if that's what you're asking.
Commissioner Krantz? You are muted somewhere, not here. Maybe on your computer. Now you're muted here. There we go. Try again. You're unmuted here. Anybody on the Zoom? Do we have a? She's open mic there. Keep trying. We think your computer is muted. In the meantime, did we have additional questions for the applicant? Yeah, Commissioner Moline.
Thanks. I'm curious if you could just let me know who you're going to market. You know, what's your demographic for sort of marketing? You spoke a little bit about kind of elderly, or I don't know if elderly would be the right word, but yeah, transitioning. But I wondered if you would care to comment on that.
At the microphone, please. Thanks.
No, as far as the marketing would go, I mean, obviously it would be local people, but we would just put it in the local MLS as well.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Additional questions, Commissioner Howe?
Yeah, just a couple questions. So you, just to clarify, you don't plan to do any, you're going to do the fee in lieu for the affordable housing, no affordable housing planned?
Yeah, when we spoke and went through the inclusionary housing ordinance with staff, what was the hangup was the like kind, and the numbers for sale product and like kind just don't work. So
Yeah, I can
I think
understand
that was
that.
really the driver.
Let me ask another question. And I want to give you an opportunity to help me understand the importance of these waivers. There are some significant waivers you guys are asking for. A 52% reduction in your block length. Your lot depth goes from 2.5 to 1 to 5.2 to 1. Lot frontage, 62% reduction. There's a lot of PUD waivers, and we're talking about some pretty significant cuts in feet. We go from 7,000 square feet of a lot area to 1,805. Lot coverage goes from 35 to 73.5. Well, anyway, so just to say there are some significant waivers. Help me understand how important this is, these waivers. I mean, I think it is important for you to have these in order to make the density that you need. If you went less dense, how many of these waivers do you think we could mitigate?
Less dense looks like a totally different project. So our RM zoning district, as I mentioned earlier, is not set up for really anything that exists in Old Town right now. We have similarities out there, but we have most of Old Town as legal nonconforming right now. And I think that's significant. I think it's significant that we haven't had a zoning update to the RM zoning district in a meaningful way since 1973. We have a zoning district that is not compatible with today's market or the way we want to develop. And it certainly isn't the way we want to be developing even in our Old Town. And I know our Old Town overlay zoning district discussion will probably address that. Not to turn an application into a policy discussion, but I think that when you look at a property like this, like Clementine Commons and like Sunnyside, both of which were approved, Clementine with almost identical waivers. Let's be clear though, there are waivers and plat modifications, so, and they're different mechanisms, however, they look the same. In order to allow for a marketable product for this area of Louisville, as opposed to more larger single-family homes, which are probably not appropriate for this area, these modifications are required. As Director Zucchero had mentioned last month in our discussion, within our municipal code, we have waivers knowing that our process of doing projects like this require them. There are a lot. Clementine had a lot, and they look very similar, almost identical in many cases. And so that's the compatibility discussion around, you know, are we blazing a trail here? Or are we following a precedent, you know, to allow a product that's appropriate for this part of Louisville? And so honestly, that's my best answer for you. I'm happy to answer more specific questions if you have any, though.
No, I appreciate that, Andy. I think that's a good response. I like what you guys are doing in this project, and I like how you're trying. I have a lot of likes that I'll talk about later. The amount and extent of waivers was probably my biggest one. I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to talk about that. And I understand the scope of what you're trying to do in this project requires you to make those waivers. So I appreciate that.
Mr. Moline, questions?
Actually, just kind of continuing with Commissioner Howe's sort of line of questioning. I'm just maybe two questions here. One is, did you consider a rezoning? I can't remember if you mentioned that in your kind of narrative, and if so, what district were you eyeing, I guess, or what kind of a zoning
What
would
were
you?
we shopping for?
Yeah.
So in the history part of my presentation, it was directly in relationship to trying to marry a project that worked well with Pine Street Plaza's redevelopment.
Okay, yep.
And so the rezoning discussion was a lot more interesting from that perspective.
Okay,
When it's in the CC zoning district, it's and without a project really to compare it to or to marry it to, because they were really supposed to come in, side by side.
okay.
So what we were shopping for
Yeah.
was a mixed-use residential
Okay,
that allowed
okay.
for commercial to be a part of that. And
Okay.
we were thinking of like a neighborhood cafe, coffee shop kind of thing, little retail. It was going to be fairly minimal, but it seemed like there wanted to be some of that commercial that bled into the project if that redevelopment of Pine Street Plaza were to move forward as being discussed. But once that went off the table, then it really just kind of went back to all residential.
Okay, okay. And my second question maybe isn't a fair one, but if you could wave a wand and create or choose a current Louisville zoning district that would require less waivers and modifications, is there one out there? I'm not sure there is, but I just wondered if that is something that you'd considered, so.
We did.
Okay.
It's one more step
Sure, sure.
with a whole lot of uncertainty. And it's really important I hope you've read the letter from ownership because we go so far into this. I mean, these development discussions, these PUD discussions, these guys are all in or all out. And it's a lot of money to get to this phase. And so having one more degree of maybe higher uncertainty
Sure.
is sort of, it ends up being a risk that I think developers are just not willing to stomach.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
the concept plan, it's great if we use it appropriately. We have that step now, but unfortunately, that was not a tool at our disposal.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thanks. Really
But
appreciate it.
I'm not trying to skirt your
That's
question, but
That's very helpful. Very helpful.
Commissioner Krantz, can we try again? See if, so I see it pop up, which means something is working, but we're not able to hear you.
My question is.
There we go, okay.
Okay. Yeah, my questions are changing as we're going along. I also would like to follow up on Commissioner Howe's question. It does seem like there are significant waivers and modifications requested from our code. And I understand that the purpose is to kind of create a more innovative product. So I'm wondering if there was any consideration to using this increased density to allow for more open space or perhaps even a overpass or underpass to give more connectivity to our downtown? Or is it simply that the density is required to make this financially feasible? Or is it that I'm trying to figure out if it's just what the density is needed to make this financially feasible for the development, or if it's part of what you're calling the innovation. Because it seems to me I would love to see more density if it were to allow a common open space or to allow future access point for pedestrians to go over or under the railroad tracks for that whole entire community. So I guess that's two questions.
okay. Let me maybe ask for a clarification or maybe offer you my clarification on this. So I think we're talking about density in different ways here. So when we talk about density in relationship to a land use application, we're talking about units on the site, the count of units per square foot, okay? So that's different. Like we have an allowable within the RM zoning district for this property of 37. We're proposing 36, okay? So
Right.
that is our density for the project. Now, I think what you're talking about is a consolidation of buildings to allow more green space. Is
Yes.
that a better clarification?
That's great. Thank
Okay,
you.
okay, great. So there are a lot of factors at play here. We touched on a few, and granted, they're a little interspersed throughout the questions in the presentation. We were earlier talking about the fire department's input on the project. And so our drive aisles are defined by turning radius that are required by the vehicles. Also, we have to create discrete easements for each private and public utility. All of this increases our space. And when we do a loop through a property to provide the access for fire department and also just kind of proper mobility throughout a site, it takes up space. And so what that does is it kind of forces us to spread out a little bit. I think the choice to have a variety of housing types is an important thing that I don't want to lose sight of. A variety of housing types, mixing townhouse and single family, also takes up a little bit of space. So it's, instead of consolidating open green space, we'll call it that, in consolidated areas, the goal is that everybody has access to that within their own property, and also trying to create common green space and green space that is sort of a buffer with a utility function of handling stormwater detention. So I feel like with all the parameters that are within the project, I think it was handled really well. If you looked at some of those earlier versions, in the kind of the history portion of the first part of the presentation, there were suggestions of a little bit more open space, but they were so underbaked in terms of, access, utilities, mobility through the site, et cetera, drainage, that, I don't know if they're great representations. So, Commissioner, I don't know how to answer your question any better than to say, yes, we looked at it, and we also have all these other factors at play that I think are, also very important. So,
Right. So,
Can I add a
am
little?
I-
May I add a little to that? In the design, actually, and when we were in coordination with Pine Street Plaza and talking with the city, to answer the first part of your question, which is the connectivity over the railroad track, we had originally thought we would love to see the gravel path that comes through the Clementine Commons detention zone somehow connected to this site. Whether it runs farther up East Street on the east side and then crosses over at our southern boundary, or if it gets realigned on the east side of East Street and ties in. But we also envisioned it wrapping around in the city-owned space between us and Pine Street Plaza, with the potential for a pedestrian underpass similar to Delo's at that location, which ties into, remind me the name of the street across this way. The alley. Elm?
To Front Street. Oh, to
Front.
Elm, yeah. to
Elm, yeah. So that was actually taken into consideration. It is still laid out that way. If you look at the plat that is planned, in the northwest corner of our site, that green space is actually common track. It's not owned by that northwest unit. Should that path ever happen, we would anticipate adding a pedestrian connection from our northwest corner to that path. So that covers that side of things. And then as far as the consolidation of the townhomes, the big difference between us and the majority of the townhome projects that are being proposed right now or being built is that these are designed more as row homes, and I know there's not a row home language in the Louisville code, but the garages are detached. They don't tuck under the units. It actually addresses, it's the reason we have one of the waivers that we need, which is the ratio. It's because it creates these long, narrow lots to get the garage on that lot. If we were to tuck those garages under, then what it does is it changes the whole dynamic of the layout of the units, and it does not allow for this future potential of ADUs. So there are a lot of sort of backstories to why it's designed why it is, but in the end, as Andy said, we're really trying to provide a variety of housing type on the site and a variety of housing type within the city that isn't really being provided by anybody else. So I hope that helps clarify the question.
It does. I'm really happy to hear that it doesn't preclude the ability in some time in the future to be able to create that an underpass or connection to Elm Street. That might be something that the city has pressure to do in the future. And thanks for clarifying between the difference between the consolidation and the density. I would I still would, I understand that there are so many different things that you were able to do by consolidating, but it still seems to me that, the consolidation could, I'm still wondering if the consolidation could result in, more common green space and perhaps not using the fee in lieu for the open space.
Director Zucchero.
I just wanted to make a suggestion, just about how we review. It might help us like focus in on a review. So basically you all have an application in front of you, and you should be looking at the merits of the application, whether it meets the criteria, the waiver, the modification criteria, the PUD criteria. I would just, I know there's always a tendency to try to redesign projects, but I would try to focus on, is the merits of this project meeting the criteria rather than redesign? I think, for example, if you think it doesn't, like if you do think that there are issues with the amount of common private open space, that's a legitimate issue. And maybe not supporting it or supporting it based on the merits of the application is what I'm trying to get at.
Thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate that. Commissioner Krantz, additional questions for the applicant?
No, thank you very much.
Additional questions of the applicant? Commissioner Moline?
Well, could I just piggyback on Director Zucchero's comment there? Could you just clarify, Parks and Open Space staff reviewed this and has approved this, the fact that this is going to be cash in lieu for this open space dedication?
Right, they've been part of the referral process.
Yeah.
And the staff has not requested anything different.
Chair, I just have one more question.
Please.
One quick question, based on the original option with the 12 end unit condos having the potential for that ADU. You have 23 parking spots plus one ADA parking spot around the perimeter. If you had those 12 units and they were 2 bedrooms, is that how you came up with what that parking ratio was and what those available spots were for the site?
Roughly. Those units, I believe, would only require one space given their type, but we felt like visitor parking was also important for the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Did all of the units that were proposed for aging in place all have about 5 stairs to get in them? If I saw that rendering properly?
Yeah, I knew that was going to come up. So, and our civil engineer wanted us to address this specifically. Do you mind? So Leslie Yui from Sunita's group was our civil engineer. We had discussions about that zero entry, and that was the criteria originally. We have, so this is an incredibly flat site. If you've ever driven by it and noticed it, or even looked at the original plat with the topo, it is a very flat site. Drainage is obviously very important, and we worked very hard to follow natural drainage patterns, but what happened was that the drainage off of the sites to basically follow the path down the road and into the detention ponds did not allow for a zero entry. We would basically end up flooding all of those units. So there are discussions that can be had around accessible entries through ramps. Residential allows for a little bit better latitude with that than commercial, but that is an issue that we were really trying hard to address. And it's not necessarily over, but our drainage is highly dictating like where those elevations of the homes are set at right now.
Thank you. And did the team do any evaluation of access to solar for potential PV? I know that's, yeah.
So if you notice, the townhouses in particular are oriented in an east-west direction, and they have very long platforms for PV to be oriented. The homes are a little bit more dynamic in terms of where that PV would get located. We do have south-facing roofs for most of those units. Some of those units will only have kind of that east or west orientation, probably east, given our evening thunderstorms. And so I think with our layout, we really just did the best we could with how that got laid out.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Krantz?
Yeah, just one more quick one. Was there any discussion with the residents of the 10 existing homes to see if they would or any interest from them in becoming residents of this new development?
So we had actually engagement from a few of those tenants. They came to the historical demo review. There were mostly comments about how much they've loved living there. The primary person was someone who lost their home in the Marshall Fire. They lived in the county just right close to Home Depot and have really enjoyed having been able to have a home in Louisville during that time frame. They are moving out. Otherwise, engagement with that neighborhood that's currently there was little to none, honestly. So also, just to mention, we did also try to engage with the Clementine HOA and never really had a response from them. So efforts were made, but we can only go so far and work with responses as opposed to knocking on doors.
Great. Thank you. All right, seeing no additional questions at this time, let's take a 10-minute break and reconvene at 5 minutes to 9-minute break.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Great, welcome back. We'll now open it up to public comment. I do see we have 4 people in the Zoom now. If you all would like to use the raise hand button, if you care to comment on this issue. As we move into that, I would like to enter today's addendum. Addendum 1, there was a slight change in nomenclature, addendum 1. Yeah, all right. If we can enter that into the record, the motion, please.
I would move that addendum 1 be into the record for this item.
Thank you.
Second?
Great. Commissioner Osterman gets it. We'll give you. There's that slight difference in distance. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Carries. And I believe I see 1 hand raised for our Zoom. If we can welcome Mr. Cooperman. And we will unmute you first here. There we go. We have you unmuted here.
Hi, this is Josh Cooperman. I live in Louisville. Just like to make a few brief remarks. First of all, I think this is a great spot for residential redevelopment, particularly being near to downtown, walkable to downtown and bikeable to downtown. Secondly, I was gonna comment about the zoning and the density of the development, but I really appreciated the presentation about some of the history there and the discussion among the commissioners. So I think I'll just leave it at the fact that it seems like, you know, our zoning is probably the issue with this property, and it seems like the developer has done the best they can given that zoning. I would next like to say it would be really nice to see affordable housing in this development, but again, I understand that given the zoning and its restrictions, it probably doesn't make sense, and the fee in lieu is probably a fine option in this case. Finally, I'd just like to pick up on a comment from Commissioner Howe about the fencing, as well as some of the material that is planned for, I think, for the siding. In part, it's wood siding, and the fencing is supposed to be wood. This development would be right across the street, across 42, from some open space. I don't know how great the wildfire risk is on that open space, but it's pretty close by. So it might be worthwhile suggesting that the developer reconsider using a cedar fence and using some cedar siding. I know it's not required currently by our codes, but it might be a good idea. That's all. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Seeing no additional hands raised, do we have any final questions? Actually, do I have of staff? No. Do we have any additional questions for staff for the applicant at this time? If not, then we open it now for an applicant response and closing statement. If you have a closing statement.
Yeah. No additional comment. Nothing other than just thank you for the great questions and consideration, and looking forward to your deliberation.
Thank you. And a staff closing statement.
No additional comments from staff, thank you.
I will now close the public hearing, and the planning commissioners will deliberate on the evidence presented. During deliberations, no further public comment or other testimony or evidence will be received. Who would like to begin?
I can start if you want me to.
Okay, great. Commissioner Howe, thank you.
First of all, thanks to everybody for the presentations. It really helped me sift through a lot of the items and concerns I had to start with. And you know, we all love Louisville, and we all want it to stay as a small town, and we all go through growing pains. And it reminds me when I was in 5th grade and Mrs. Ham made me do square dancing, and it's awkward because you have to work with 3 other people to make these configurations, and you know, promenade to the left, and you have to overcome some things that are uncomfortable to achieve what's necessary. And I think that this is one of those such proposals. So I went through pretty much line by line, not tonight, but before tonight, to follow up on Mr. Zaccaro's comment about which items this was in non-compliance with. And so I thought about 3 in particular, and the more I read these, the more I realize that they are compliant with a lot of these requirements. There are, as I mentioned before, lots of likes and dislikes, many more likes than dislikes, but I'll talk about those right now. The likes that I have on this project is that it is compliant with pretty much all of the comprehensive plan principles and the municipal codes. And I think that you guys worked really hard to make this proposal a success and meet that criteria. I think that I'm most excited about this because this parcel has such potential. It has the 3 L's, location, location, location. It is close to the railroad, it is close to downtown, and it's close to parks. And I like how you guys have integrated all of that into your proposal, as well as to look forward into the needs for housing down the road. I really like how you have laid out a lot of your floor plans to accommodate for potential older or people who want to live on the main floor. I think that is forward thinking, especially with the housing plan that we're going to hear in just a few minutes. I like the materials and the palettes that you guys have used. And just to build on some of the public comment, I think that the fencing, maybe we could use a less combustible material. That would be my only comment there. I like your variety of housing types, your architectural style. I thought I really like that. And I like that you guys are compliant with the 2021 IEC sustainability. I also like that this adds to some potential growth of downtown, and I think that is important. There are some dislikes, that there's no affordable housing. I wish we could accommodate more affordable housing, but I know that may not be part of the parameter of this project. I also dislike the fee in lieu for the 15% land use dedication. But once again, this is a small land parcel, and I think it's difficult to get to that 15% without sacrificing some of the goals of the project, which is to create housing that is similar to adjacent properties. So in the end, I thought that this was a really interesting proposal, one that I had to dance around in my mind a little bit with, but in the end, I think it would be successful for Louisville in the long term.
So I am going to be in support of this as well. I, like Commissioner Howe, appreciated the presentations, the staff report. I find myself in agreement with all of the staff report items, in particular, the portion where the PUD criteria analysis goes through issue by issue. So I find the proposal compliant with that. And I appreciated the applicant's perspective and patience in working through this, but I appreciate that perspective of trying to fit something in here on a site that's challenging and in a place where we're really, as you showed in your presentation, we're really close to downtown, and yet we have some kind of funky zoning still. And I appreciate what you're trying to do here. So I'm interested to see how this works for you. So I find myself in support. Oh, and the one last thing I was going to say, this is going to start to get us towards some of that housing need that we've seen in our assessment, and this, an approval here would start to chip away at those annual numbers that we are going to need to hit. So thanks.
Anybody else want to volunteer comments? Yes? Sure. Go ahead.
Let's see, thank you for the presentations tonight. It clarified a lot of questions that I had coming in tonight, so it was really great to have the presentation. And I'm also in support of this application for a lot of the same reasons that the other commissioners have already mentioned. So just going through my notes to see if there's anything more that I can add, I really just want to echo some of the comments already, but in particular the fact that this development is adding more diversity, and diversity not just in the housing type, but then also diversity in the floor plans. I think that you are proposing some floor plans that are quite unique for our community and will have some really attractive features, so that's appreciated. And then just all of the thinking that went into the design. I think aesthetically, it's a very very aesthetically pleasing design, different than some of the developments in the area, and so gives more diversity. And then also the environmental and sustainability considerations that went into it. I think initially, some of the waivers that were proposed, similarly, I also questioned, but I think that with the evidence that's been presented in the rationale, I think that it's very clear to see why those waivers are needed. And I think it's aligned with the comprehensive plan. So again, I think that, yeah, nothing else to add, but thank you again.
So I think everybody said thank you, so I'll say thank you for working on this project since April 2021. Andy, to your point, right, obstacles, speed bumps, potholes, they can derail development projects. I think, some people consider the word development a bad word. I think it's not a bad word when development is done responsibly and correctly. To some of the other commissioners' points, right? We have a proposal for development that is electrified, moves in the right direction, right? Where we are beholden to the beneficial choices that Xcel Energy is making, and pretty soon, all of our electricity consumption will be so much cleaner than other alternatives. So I appreciate both the nod to being PV ready on the site and electrifying, consolidating loads, building efficiently. I think those are great things. You have done a good job with the density on the site in order to be able to develop the housing units that, as some of the other commissioners have noted, are a necessary step to evolve Louisville. I think as I said in the meeting last month, right, sometimes we need the people first before we can get the commercial support. And this is a great site to be able to do that. So I appreciate the effort and the time and the cost that has gone into getting to this point where you're presenting here. I have a different perspective from the rest of the commissioners insofar as I look at something, a development plan like this that has the amount of consolidation that you presented with the unique building types and housing stock that you've designed in here. And while that housing stock and those building types creates a lot of fun and different approaches to creating the types of housing that are in here and in the downtown area, it also presents a problem where when I look at this plan, while you have done a great job in describing the dialogue and collaboration with Marshall Mestis and the rest of the fire department to come up with the requirements for access, there are a couple things that do still concern me. You know, I looked and you do have 5 fire hydrants identified on here, but as described, right, this is essentially kind of a parking lot width drive aisle. And while it does accommodate, you know, what are identified on the plans as a pumper truck, you know, essentially what happens in any scenario is if a house catches on fire in downtown Louisville especially, you're going to have a minimum of, you know, 2 engines and 2 ambulances and a fire chief, or a ladder truck and an engine and 2 ambulances and a fire chief. And essentially this one drive aisle that's here is going to get clogged up really quickly. And when an engine connects a hose to a hydrant, that drive aisle is taken out of commission. Nothing can get through, nothing can get by. And when I look at these, the condos that are in the middle, in the most consolidated portion, from the closest approach from a drive aisle to a front door of lot 33 or 26, it's easily 100 feet from the curb, from where that engine would be parked. And, you know, an engine has, you know, pre-connect lines that are the quick grab lines, so firefighters can get them, run up to a door, go through a door and put out a fire. Those pre-connect lines are 200 feet long. And so when you waste 100 feet getting from the curb just to the front door, and then you have 10-foot floor heights for a 3-story condo, if there's a fire on the top floor, you might not get the hose there. And that's concerning to me. Now, you know, this is going to be this is going to be a dumpster fire, no pun intended, if there's a fire in this place, between the vehicle traffic, you know, all the firefighters running around, and all of the efforts just to try to get water on a fire in a middle unit that's attached to others, where flame spread is a major concern. Now, I say all these things not to the point of trying to redesign, as Director Zuccaro made an astute comment about, but just to voice a concern that, you know, pragmatically, while you are dealing with a very constrained site, you know, I think there is potentially another opportunity to look at, you know, some other way to facilitate emergency access, to further help anybody who's going to end up buying a home here, living here, and you know, establishing families here. So I say all those things, and I will end with the point that I am in support of the application. So thank you again.
Commissioner Krantz, I see your hands up. We'll jump to her while we're there. All right.
Thanks. I guess just to clarify what Commissioner Choi just said, is you feel like this is adequate to pass on to City Council with those comments, or with a condition that they take a second look at the fire hydrant configuration?
I'm not asking for any conditions. I'm providing my support with the hope that there will be continued collaboration with the fire department for pre-plans and a consideration of additional access to facilitate emergency response.
Okay, so I guess I'm probably I think there's a whole lot of things that are really fantastic about this, and they've been mentioned by the other commissioners, especially the fact that they're considering solar, the solar orientation of the roofs, the compliance with the dark sky wasn't mentioned, even though that didn't pass. The lighting plan seemed great, and I'm also I love that it's compliant with the 2021 IECC energy codes. I wasn't as comfortable with it meeting, with it meeting the modification review criteria. I felt that we were making too much of staff made too much of a stretch to conclude that the 3 modification requests meet the modification review criteria number 2, 3, and 4. And And I was thinking how each modification request has to meet all 5 of the review criteria. And I disagreed with the staff analysis that any of them met number 2, 3, and 4. But I guess from my comment before, I think I was most concerned about the usable, functional, open space and buffer areas that are part of the modification criteria number 3. I found that the staff analysis for number 3 was a bit of reverse thinking, because the analysis says that the modifications are warranted by the narrow, tall designs of the proposed housing units. But if we read the criteria, the narrow designs would have to be warranted by the needs of the residents for usable, functional, open space and buffer areas. So I feel like we applied that in reverse. So I would have been inclined to say that this does not meet the modification criteria in order for the applicant to come back with something that addresses the needs of the residents for open space. So I guess I'll maintain that I don't believe it meets that modification criteria number 3. I'm probably in the minority here, but if that's something that anybody else is interested in picking up on, I don't think we've applied that criteria correctly. Otherwise, I think there's a lot of things that are really great. I would say that this is really close, but not quite meeting the needs for the green space and the open space. I've come around listening to what Commissioner Howe said about the affordable housing and how it would be really hard to put that into a small development like this. On the affordable housing issue, it seems to me a shame that we're losing probably 10 what are probably naturally occurring affordable houses in order to gain houses that are probably at market value, may be, from what I'm seeing with the same square footage at Clementine, not attainable to anybody who's not, they would be above the average of, I think, which was about 850,000 for a unit. So I'm not feeling that, I definitely, I feel like the fee in lieu is the best we can do. So that's pretty much my comment. But thanks for considering it.
Thank you. And can I ask staff to pull up one of the site plans that showed kind of the drive areas and the alleyways as we continue? Commissioner Basket, if you want to share your thoughts at this time.
I am in support of this proposal. I think that it is, as the comp plan calls for now, an urban neighborhood. So I'm pretty comfortable given the adjacencies of local open space. I think the connectivity is really important, and I understand that this development won't solve all the pedestrian connectivity, so I hope that we'll continue to look at that in the context of public investment. I appreciate the public comment, the letter from Mike Kransdorf saying that you've resolved his concerns about the adjacent commercial development and the compatibility with that. I see this as a really great puzzle piece fitting into the Highway 42 corridor, and I hope that it moves forward.
Thank you. I know the applicant had one of the similar to this, but it had the driveways in red or pink. Maybe we could pull up that one. I think it either said one version had parking, one version had, I'm not sure what the total of it was. And I guess I'll begin, yeah, that's great. That one's fine, actually, if you can. So, right, with the requests for variances on lot coverage and setbacks, and I think Commissioner Krantz, my concerns are probably in a similar area as yours. When I look at this, and I think about the benefits of density, I'm not seeing that this has been designed to that. Everything in pink there is essentially front-loading garages or alley-loading garages with minimal benefit from that alley-loading garage, right? So normally with an alley-loading garage, everybody has a open space in the front of their house that you get to know your neighbors from. You might even have that with a front-loading garage at times. And so while it's not the density numbers of units or even square footage at that point, it's this whole lack of community that has, to me, has not been built into this design. I am actually intrigued by this thought of the ADUs underneath the units, and appreciate that that's really the only way to get those is by having that strange configuration with a few hundred square foot backyard, so that they can have light off of that back side of the building. I'm just curious as to what other people think about the setbacks, variances, and the, I guess some people might call some of these larger single-family units perhaps a McMansion of sorts, because they're so large and they're squeezed into such small pieces of property and they're front-loading, that it just doesn't have the benefits that I would look for when pushing for that kind of density and those kind of variances, but I haven't heard much of that concern from others, though. So I'm curious as to anybody's reactions to some of that thought.
As always, Chair Bronice, I appreciate your comments, and they usually cause me to reflect again. And I think one of the things that struck me, let me just say, I hear what you're saying. I think, these aren't labeled, these alleyways, but the alleyway in the townhome area that's the easternmost. And I can envision places in Louisville that look like that already, where you have a small alleyway and then each unit has a garage there. That is not really going to be a place where, at least in my estimation, that's probably not going to be a place where people are going to find sort of a sense of community and hang out in. I do think, I guess I'm hopeful that where people are going to spend time in this neighborhood is in the green space area there, just to the west of that kind of north-south.
Outlot B, is that, yeah?
Yeah, Outlot B, the front-loaded townhomes on East Street. And then when I look at the single-family homes, I guess I share your concern that are we going to be building a community here, or are we going to be building kind of a row of sort of
Garages.
Yes, garages. Which, to be fair, like in the neighborhood I live in, Louisville, the garage is a prominent feature of the homes, and obviously it's not quite as dense as this particular area either. But I guess I'm as I look at the fronts of the homes, I still feel that there's something there, and I guess I do hope that the project team has thought about these considerations and hopes that they'll be able to build a neighborhood and a community that'll make these streets feel lively, I guess. So,
Yeah,
but I appreciate your, as always, I appreciate your comments.
And just on that thought, to me, Outlaw B is going to really more feel like people's front yards. I don't see who knows, I can be completely wrong on this, but the single-family homeowners kind of coming there and are they going to have a picnic on the grass? I don't think so, right? There was a mention of perhaps having some benches at either end of it, but I think that Though on paper, it shows as common space, I think the feeling will be a little bit different than that. And then again, to the front-loaded garages, all of the houses that we've experienced in the past do all have yard in front.
Yeah.
This is concrete, so when you see all that pink, that's concrete. So where do you go? So curious as to others' thoughts on that, if anybody has any reactions to my concerns with lot coverage and setback variance.
Similar to what my comment was before, the limited setbacks are concerning just from a fire and life safety perspective and fire spread. It's the zoning that applies and the available dimensions of the site are a hard equation to solve. Ideally, right, I would love to see things in Louisville take the shape more of things like village homes in Davis, California, but we don't have 70 acres to develop that are, winding paths and, fruit trees and everybody gets a cul-de-sac. So I understand and I appreciate what you're saying. It's a lot of concrete and hardscape and not a lot of place to incidentally, run into the neighbor kid throwing a Frisbee or, folks walking their dogs around the path. But I also appreciate, that it's a difficult equation with the limitations on the dimensions and the, density per the zoning that makes the numbers work as a development to establish additional housing stock.
Commissioner Krantz. You're muted. Oh, we're gonna, thank you. Maybe?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I apologize. I didn't want to get anybody sick today, but I really appreciate what you said, Commissioner Choi. But I just want to, when I think about it, I don't think that the maximum density for a mixed-use residential is a requirement. It's just what the maximum density is. And so I do feel like it's necessary to meet the modification criteria. And because I don't feel it's meeting the modification criteria, I would like that to be an opportunity to look at the need for more of a community, more open space, as Chair Brown Eyes was saying. When you go into, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of opportunities for interaction between the neighbors, because you kind of come into your garage and go directly into your house. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of private space and less, and a little bit more could be done to create a community if, we were to consider, the modification criteria number 3, for the usable green space and what would benefit the residents, especially like, there's the lack of a playground or something for smaller children, or a place for smaller children to go. So I guess I'm just saying I still have the same concern.
I hear what you're saying. To me, it's an interesting dilemma because we don't, well, I'm going to use the example. There's a large lot that's, I think, maybe almost 2 acres right on Hutchinson, that's right by Louisville Elementary. And there have been some, ideas around what that could be, right? 5 houses, 6 houses, something like that. And
I would just caution you to not taint something that may come before us in the future.
yeah, I'm just using this as an example, right? And you could take any single family house that's being built right now, rebuilt by a builder anywhere that, there might be an adaptation to what was previously there. There's a lens that gets applied, and we look at developments like this and we say, oh, it's got to have, all the bells and all the whistles. And while amenities are wonderful to develop, to provide things like playgrounds and open spaces and community spaces, that's not requisite necessarily of a developer. And I have no idea what the pro forma is on this development and, where the threshold is that says it's going to be something where the developer would continue going after doing it to make the numbers work or walk away because, there's sunk costs that aren't recoverable. And so I just, I would love to see more amenities, right? I'd love to see a whole bike park in here for kids. That being said, when I go by the Clementine development very frequently, they have that community space with a little arboretum or a little arbor back there and an area, barbecue, and I've never seen it used. I've never seen anybody there, and I go by that frequently. Now, maybe I'm just missing it and going by the wrong time of day, but what I'm trying to get to is the amenities are wonderful. The density is not a requirement, and this proposed development is under that density, but they're doing that per the zoning, and I just keep going back to it's a difficult equation to try to figure out how you fit all the bits and pieces together to get the right number of housing that helps move in the right direction, reduce or eliminate hardscape.
I'm curious, when you're speaking of the density, they don't have to meet
Right.
a certain density. So
Well,
in the back of my head is, why isn't it all townhomes?
Well, they don't have to meet the density,
more open
they don't have to meet the density to comply with code,
Right,
but they have to meet a certain density to make the numbers work.
Sure.
And if the numbers don't work, nothing happens,
right,
right?
yeah.
So I'm not saying that they're trying to meet the density to comply with the code. I'm saying that whatever the pro forma was that they put together, the number was 36. That was the density that they came up with for the 3.6 acres, that they're proposing. And because they came up with 36 units on the 3.6 acres, then what else does or does not fit in the development? The playground didn't fit. The,
Well,
barbecue.
so I don't see that as a direct trade-off. I see it as, right, it's a bigger issue of design, and this one I don't love.
Right, yeah.
Additional thoughts? Commissioner Osterman?
Yeah, thanks for raising those points, and I would definitely appreciate the comments. I was thinking about it and just maybe some other ways to think about it, the concern about not having yards in front of the single-family homes. First, I'm thinking of this as, given its proximity to downtown, I'm seeing it as just more of an urban design, and definitely a design that wouldn't be appropriate for other areas of Louisville where we would want to see more green space, more yards in front. Another thing I was thinking was that given the talk about the units having a main floor primary bedroom and being attractive to seniors aging in place, it could be attractive to not have a yard and not have the upkeep. And so I could see that being a plus in terms of targeting that particular demographic with this design.
Thanks. Any additional thoughts?
I'll just add on that. One of the modifications, and maybe this pulls together some concerns from Commissioner Krantz and you, Chairman, is the modification number 1, which says we will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or district. And at first I thought, well, of course this is altering the character of the neighborhood because we're making a dense neighborhood. But if you continue to read it, it says, in which the property is located, nor substantially or permanently impair the appropriate use or development of adjacent property. And it seems like in this particular narrative or this particular setting, it seems appropriate. When you make a yard bigger or when you make or alter the square footage, you'll also affect the affordability of the house and the affordability of the project. So I think that I'm at peace with the size of these townhomes and single-family units, and that they don't have necessarily a high maintenance or a large yard. I'm not sure that that detracts from, I'd like to think we have a nice community to offer them outside of just this parcel. But I do think that it meets that modification because I don't think it changes, when you think of the neighborhood, I think that this particular phrase is talking about adjacent properties. And I don't think it changes the character of that, the narrative of that area when we talk about Clementine and Sunnyside and then this East Street. The other modification that we talked about was number 3, which is the needs of residents for usable or functional open space and buffer areas that can be met. And I wonder what I would want out of this property if I was thinking, man, we need a good open space, and what you can actually afford to devote in this property. Even if you are at that 15%, could you create a park? What would be in that park that would be substantial for kids or adults or whatever? How big would the open space be? How usable would it be? And it seems to me like because of the location and the proximity to adjacent, such as Community Park or the Coal Creek Trail, there are other amenities within our larger community that these citizens could use. So I guess that makes me feel a little bit better about the comprehensive nature of this particular proposal, although I share your thoughts, and I think that your thoughts go back to my original concerns of the waivers, because there are short setbacks, and I think that those waivers have created a very dense, and those are my concerns. So I'm glad that I'm glad that we're echoing the same concerns, but in the greater perspective, I think I'm at peace with what we're trying to achieve with this parcel.
Commissioner Krantz. Your hand is raised at least. I don't know if.
Thank you. Just back on modification number 3, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with that one too. I mean, it says that the modification is warranted by the design amenities incorporated in the development plan and the needs of residents for usable or functional open space and buffer areas can be met. So for us to say that all of these significant lot size and orientation changes and road and block lengths, we need to be able to say that these are warranted by these design amenities. And I believe that those design amenities are supposed to be the open space and the buffer areas. So I don't feel like, I'm just trying to see how we can say that we need to have these changes for the purposes of achieving functional open space and buffer areas. Does that mean, I mean, that's what this modification requirement says. So I don't see how we can say, how we can meet that modification.
I would agree with you on that, Commissioner Krantz, and I'll let you all know, I'm going to be voting no for that reason. But I don't think there's a lot more discussion unless anybody has any hot ideas they wanted to share with the group on that. Seeing no additional, last call? Seeing none, I would request a roll. Well, actually, I got a little language here, right? Not really. I'd call for a motion.
I would offer a motion for resolution number 17, series 2023, a resolution recommending approval of a preliminary subdivision plat and preliminary planned unit development, PUD, for a 15 single-family and 21 townhome unit on a 3.6-acre parcel located at 421, 533, and 565 East Street.
I'll second that.
And a roll call, please.
Commissioner Basket,
Yes.
Commissioner Choi,
Yes.
Commissioner Osterman,
Yes.
Commissioner Moline,
Yes.
Commissioner Howe,
Yes.
Commissioner Krantz,
No.
and Chair Brown Eyes.
No. The motion carries. Best of luck moving forward. Thank you all. We'll take a 5-minute break, reconvening at 46. 5.
Thanks. It was old skateboards.
So who made it for you?
It was a company out of California that makes them. Yeah.
Recording stopped.
Oops, great, if we can reconvene. Thank you, and this is a, let's see. Yeah, it's just that. Staff discussion of housing plan informational update.
Yes, good evening. Chair Brown Ice, members of the commission. I'm Rob Zuccaro. I'm going to be kicking off the presentation for city staff. We're also going to have our planning manager, Jeff Hurt, take part of the presentation. And we have one of our consultants online with Echo Northwest, Leanne Ryan. She's going to go over some of the information as well. I'm going to give a brief introduction. Leanne's going to go over the housing needs assessment. I know you all have seen a lot of the detailed demographics that went into that assessment, but that assessment is complete, including the executive summary. And really what we're here tonight for is to look at the strategy matrix. So that's the next evolution of the plan. And Jeff's going to go over the strategies, also talk a little bit, I think, about the public input to date. So again, I just want to mention that we are looking at comprehensive plan coming on the heels of this. This is really it's really going to inform the comprehensive plan and a lot of city policies, but especially comprehensive plan. So this is just kind of a first step, and there's a lot of community discussions to have on how we're going to actually implement some of these strategies. So again, this plan is more of a high-level document. It does. I know the last applicant talked about some of the numbers about population in the plan. I just wanted to mention, we're not looking at those as targets. We're not setting targets for future population. That's if we were to absorb our share of projected population growth in the region, that's what we would expect. It doesn't mean those numbers aren't helpful, but we wanted to break that down into a 10-year chunk and then that longer 25-year chunk, because we are doing the 10-year comprehensive plan coming up. So this is where we're at. We're at that strategy development stage. We had a public open house, a lot of great input last week. Once we get this final input, our consultants are going to be drafting the final plan, which we will bring back to you so that you can look at the final plan, make a recommendation to City Council on that as well before they're looking at adopting it. Again, this isn't just an affordable housing plan. This is a housing assessment for all segments of our community, through the whole life cycle of where people need housing, but affordable housing is certainly a very important part of it. Demographics are changing. Senior housing is becoming more and more of an issue in addition to affordable housing. Leanne's going to go into a lot of those demographics, which I think they're just really shocking and hopefully eye-opening. There's a lot at the state level about what we need to do in our communities to try to, have more equitable communities, more welcoming communities as well. I wanted to throw out some population numbers to set the stage too, which I think are really interesting. So this is Louisville. This is City of Louisville population. From 1910 to 1970, there was very little change. It was right around 2,000 people until 1970. Then we doubled in a decade. And then between 1980 and 2000, we, I think, more than tripled our population. There was extensive change. The community really transformed over those decades into, very close to where it is today. But I also thought it was interesting to see that between 2000 and 2010, the population actually declined a little bit, which, I'm going to show you some other graphs where we're looking at maybe some slight population declines. And then 2010 to 2020, we kind of ticked up again. But it was nothing in comparison to those previous decades. When you break that last decade up, a lot of our growth has been on the north side of the city. There's been a little bit of growth in D-Lo, the east side of downtown with the D-Lo development from a housing standpoint. But North End and Steel Ranch are the vast majority of this. But you can see around 2017, those neighborhoods mostly built out, the three that I just talked about. And how you could see over here that the housing development really slowed down significantly, after 2017. And with some of the demographic changes, aging population, more empty nesters, more affluent population that tends to have fewer, smaller households, fewer children. We were actually, this data is from the state demographer, they're actually projecting some population declines, even though our housing stock's slightly going up. This really changes the fabric of the community. I mean, this community in that 1980 to 90 to 2000 housing boom, that was the affordable housing for people. It was a bedroom community for Boulder and Denver. It's, such a great location, being in between all of these great areas. That's where a lot of the police officers and the school teachers and the professors at CU, this is where they found affordable housing. One of the things, I think I might get this number wrong, I don't know if Leanne will go over it, but the Echo Northwest has pointed to, of the people living in Louisville today that own homes, only 26% of them, I think is the number, could afford to buy that home today. And so it's just, it's just a real issue within the community and the state. There's some state initiatives. So I think the city has a lot to think about with the next comprehensive plan. The city has been thinking about this, but here's where this also leads into is school enrollment. Boulder Valley School District and our local schools have 5-year projected continuing declines. And so all of these numbers too don't really fully take into account Marshall Fire either. These numbers are pre-Marshall Fire, which is also having quite an impact both on schools and the demographics of the city and all of that. So with all that, we are looking to develop strategies. We assume that the city wants to develop kind of the strata of housing for all kinds, again, of life stages and, trying to be an inclusive community. I've got a list here of supporting policies. We do have an EDI, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Task Force. One of their primary recommendations was for the city to look at affordable housing. And, it's a really important part of what the city might be trying to achieve here. It's really important for economic vitality. So these are some of the major city council initiatives that they're really, in their work plans that they're wanting to address. We hear a lot about workforce housing. So there are a lot of businesses, both service businesses that are local, unique businesses that make Louisville, a very unique place, as well as some of our really high-tech businesses in the Colorado Tech Center that hire, 6-figure salary engineers. We're hearing from them that there is not enough affordable housing, workforce housing for service industry all the way through, high-paying positions in the city. So economic vitality could really be impacted by housing too. Greenhouse gas, our sustainability, vehicle miles traveled, all these things that you hear about in planning, they're really affected by housing and housing development versus employment development. We've almost doubled our employment population. I think it's over 90%, while our residential population has gone up by about 12%. So people are having to drive further to get to those jobs. Part of the metric of affordable housing also is the cost of transportation, which is often overlooked. So even if the affordable housing is very far away, I mean, that has quality of life impacts to those residents to spend more and more time in their cars. But it also adds to the overall cost of living far away from where you work. It's, maintaining that car, more gas, all of those things. We do have a transportation master plan. It's got a lot of great goals for us, biking, walking, transit. So what we can do for the TMP and the sustainability goals is to try to focus development, new housing development, where there is existing infrastructure. That could be transit infrastructure, that could be city infrastructure. It's more affordable for the city to serve those areas, and there's a lot of benefits to sustainability, as well as potentially biking, walking, and transit use. So these are all things that we can achieve with our housing policies beyond just affordable housing. The city is part of the Boulder County Regional Housing Strategy we adopted in 2017. That does support 12% affordability countywide. We have about, I think it's somewhere hovering between 3.5% and 4% deed restricted affordable housing in the city today that's managed by the Boulder County Housing Authority. So we're quite a bit below that 12%. Especially in Old Town, there's a lot of opportunity also to potentially support historic preservation goals of the existing historic housing stock, as well as building housing that's more traditional to kind of complement the actual historic home. So there are strategies in here. We don't get into a lot of detail. This is kind of the this is the time where we're looking at really the higher level strategies that will turn into the more the more specific on the ground initiatives. So we want to check in with you tonight, make sure, get your input on the strategies as we move the plan forward. And with that, I'm going to stop and how are we sharing Leanne's? Is she going to screen share? Okay. So I'll go up to the lectern.
For me to share, Rob?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, I think I need permission.
Okay, give us just a second. You might have to promote her to a panelist. I think you have to promote her to a Okay, Leanne, you should be good. There you go.
Okay. I've only got one screen tonight because I'm holed up at a conference in a hotel room. So hopefully you can see that. All right. Are you just seeing the slide deck, right?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Leanne Ryan. I'm a project manager at Echo Northwest. I've been managing the housing study alongside my project director, Tyler Bump, who first presented to you all back in June. And of course, we've been working closely with Louisville staff, which has really been a pleasure for us. You've got a great group of people working for the city of Louisville and a super engaged community on this topic that we've enjoyed talking to and getting to know throughout the process. And I particularly enjoyed watching your deliberation this evening. So back in June, Tyler presented preliminary findings of the H&A that were actually not so preliminary. We just hadn't finished the full draft of the report yet. And the document wasn't out, so we were calling them preliminary. So what you heard was a pretty robust picture of the demographic and housing dynamics in Louisville. So this information tonight is probably familiar to you. I'll just quickly review a few of the heavy hitting points from the H&A that really helped us shape the draft strategies and actions that Jeff will step through with you all in just a bit. The H&A really painted a picture of substantial affordability challenges across the board in Louisville, but those challenges will particularly affect the ability of younger households and families, single person households, households on fixed incomes, both renters and homeowners, to find adequate housing to meet their range of needs at an affordable price point. And when we talk about an affordable price point, that will mean something different for every household. There isn't just, one price or one sales price that's deemed affordable. It'll be a wide range. So overall, the last 10 years, we saw a decrease in the number of households earning less than $75,000 annually, and about a 17% increase in the share of households earning greater than $200,000 annually. So this really starts to tell us that the low-income households might be moving out of Louisville, likely in search of more affordable housing options elsewhere, and an in-migration of wealthier households. And across the board, Louisville experienced the greatest increase in median income over the last 10 years of nearby cities, rising to about $125,000 a year. So at the same time, we saw 132% increase in median home sale prices. Most of my work over the last year has been, or until the last year actually, has been along the West Coast in high cost areas where affordability has been totally compromised. And these are definitely approaching some of those West Coast level numbers. So really high increases in housing costs during a short period of time. There was also a 5% decrease in home ownership. There's a variety of things that could be contributing to this, but it's likely that it's becoming more difficult to buy a home for a lot of families and households. There was also a 58% increase in rents as well, and this is really important when we start looking at how Louisville homeowners earn about twice what Louisville renters do. So those increases are going to be really difficult for renters to keep up with, especially those making below that 80% area median income. Cost burdening is a major factor in understanding affordability in any jurisdiction. And just as a refresher, I think Tyler probably went over this with you in June, but a household is considered to be cost burdened if they spend more than 30% of their income on their housing costs. So that's all in housing costs, insurance, utilities, mortgage, rent, all of it. So we see around 41% of Louisville renters are cost burdened and 16% of Louisville homeowners are cost burden. And we do typically see renters becoming more cost burden than homeowners because of the lending requirements and qualifications when purchasing a home that sometimes help people from spending too much on their housing costs. But 41% again is a really large portion of your renters, so they're really likely struggling to afford housing. And in Louisville, we actually saw a decrease in cost burdening over the last decade, but this can be a really misleading data point if you're not looking at it alongside other income and housing cost trends. So this decrease is in this case is more likely due to the lower income households leaving Louisville and being replaced by those wealthier households. So over the last 10 years, we've also seen Louisville's population aging faster than other cities nearby. This is actually one of the first cities I've worked in where we see a decrease in all age brackets except for those 65 and older, where we saw an increase of about 5%. And again, all those other age brackets declining. As of 2021, the median age was 43, and it's in Louisville, and it's among the highest of comparison cities that we looked at in the H&A. And then when looking at the housing stock, we find that it lacks diversity needed to serve a wider range of household types and incomes. So it's 67% single family detached, which is the highest share among the other jurisdictions we looked at, the second highest, just behind Erie, which was at 89% single family detached. We also saw a drop off in residential development between 2018 and 2022, which is something we don't typically see in high cost growing areas. And most of the housing production that took place between 2022 and 2023 was related to the rebuilding after the Marshall Fire. So a key part of the H&A is to gain an understanding around the extent of total housing units needed in Louisville and the quantity of housing needed for different income levels over the next several decades. Rob touched on this a little bit. A significant challenge facing Louisville is going to be producing enough new units to accommodate a potential population growth and to provide those affordable housing options that'll match the needs of those current and future residents. So in our analysis, we use the state's population forecast for Boulder County and Louisville's current share of that population. We projected the number of housing units the city could expect. This is just, there are a lot of assumptions made in this calculation, but assuming conditions remain similar to today. So over the next 10 years and then more long-term, those 25 years. An important part of our methodology that we use when accounting for the future need is underproduction. So underproduction is essentially the number of housing units that didn't get built relative to household formation over that same period of time. We also account for what we assume to be a healthy housing market that has, a reasonable level of vacancy and absorption, along with some activity of second vacation homes. So by 2047, our analysis showed that a total housing need of about 2,400 units to accommodate that assumed population and household growth based on that state forecast and Louisville's share of the county population. Our analysis also breaks down the housing units into income brackets, so the city can begin to think about the types of units that will be needed to meet the housing needs. So we're looking at around 1,100 housing units that will be needed for those households earning under the area median income. So those units that the market might not naturally deliver on their own. And then given the planning horizon for the comprehensive plan, we see that you need about 1,100 units over the next 10 years. So dialing back from that 25-year planning horizon. So in response to what we've been hearing from the community engagement efforts, which included several rounds of interviews and focus groups and 2 what we think to be successful open houses, we developed a strategy matrix that outlines the preliminary strategies with targeted actions to help meet those housing needs that we're seeing in the data, but also kind of reinforced through those community voices. Jeff's going to walk through those with you all, but they kind of cover 3 general areas around increasing residential development in general to help better meet demand and accommodate population growth both regionally and locally. And then expanding access to affordable housing, knowing that housing is, not only needed for those making above 80% AMI, and then those lower income households as well will need, those units will need a little bit more assistance when being delivered. And this is especially when thinking about, especially important when thinking about how to attract and retain a local workforce. Rob touched on this as well. So thinking about your firemen, your police officers, government employees, your baristas, restaurant workers, and the whole spectrum of a workforce. And then we have strategies aimed at increasing housing diversity. So looking at ways to create more opportunities for home ownership, particularly more affordable home ownership, and expanding that rental stock in Louisville. So more multifamily development, what we call middle housing, which are your townhomes, duplexes, cottages, ADUs. So yeah, I'll pass it off to Jeff to walk through the strategies with you, which we're really looking forward to getting your feedback on. And I appreciate the opportunity to present tonight.
Thank you very much. And then also in the packet, there was kind of 3 questions that were posed. I think it was can you touch on those too? It was, what do we like? What do we need more information on? And one other.
Exactly, yeah. Let me get teed up here and get the zoom in a bit. Still pretty small, but I'll go through it. So yeah, I'll kind of round things out. Jeff Hurt, I'm your new planning manager, first time up here, thanks. So Rob mentioned our purpose tonight really is to, I think, 1, introduce sort of an update on the project, but more specifically, we were looking for feedback on this specific document in your packet. This is really the foundation and sort of the bones for the actual deliverable that our consultant is going to start cranking on. So the 3 questions, as you said, to be thinking about as I kind of orient you to this document are 1, what's missing from this list? There's a whole slew of potential actions. I think there's about 30 in here. 1, what's missing? 2, which of these sort of resonate with you or you would see as the highest priority we should focus the most on? And then 3, more information you might need to even understand what these are or clearly articulate sort of what they might do. So those are the 3 sort of lenses we'd like for you to look at as we go through this. Our thought is for me to first just orient you to this document because it's meaty and there's a lot going on. There's 6 sort of buckets of actions, strategies. So I was just going to hit real quickly each of the 6 and kind of what they are. Go through each of those, and our thought was we would just circle back to the beginning. What council did was they just rolled up their sleeves and like started going through each of them and talking about each of them. So we could get through the whole thing.
It's however you all want to do it, if you want to ask questions about each of them, or add to the list, however you want to do it. So
So then
that's,
also, just as a point of order, if we are going to wrap up at some reasonable hour this evening, I don't know that we'll be able to discuss all of these. So let's, after we hear from them a little bit, we'll kind of check back in with each other and see where we want to go with it, whether we needed to continue it to next month or not. So,
okay,
thanks.
I'll keep that in mind, try to be brief.
No, I mean, not necessarily. No, it's important stuff.
Okay.
So I think we want to hear what you have to share by all means.
Okay, great. Appreciate that. Yeah, so just starting from sort of the top of this table, and the way this is structured is the strategies on the left, that's sort of your high level category, and then the specific actions within that strategy are listed. And there's a summary, and then if you want to get into it, sort of categorized, but if it's policy or funding or additional research, things like that, and which income levels are served by it. So there's a lot going on in this table, but the first sort of category is basically, so it's identify opportunities for residential development. Basically what that means for this table is look for places geographically in Louisville that could be appropriate for new housing types. Sort of those are commercial corridors, transit corridors, places like what we just saw in the case before this, and how do you dial in regulatory changes, policy changes around that. Rob mentioned that a lot of this will tie into the comprehensive plan. Point of clarification, this housing plan doesn't call for specific changes at specific locations. It just sets sort of the foundation for new zoning districts, criteria for rezonings, things like that. This being our first housing plan, it's important to have that sort of policy foundation first, and that's what we're doing now. So this is about where could those new housing types go, and what sort of tools might we have to promote that. So that's one of 6. And then the second one, I know this is probably about impossible to read, but the second one is really sort of zoning code heavy. That's adopting code allowances for more diverse housing development. So that's the sort of package of zoning rule changes that we've come up with, and based on the consultant's analysis, they actually did a pro forma economic analysis of prototypical sites in Louisville to look at sort of which levers from a regulatory standpoint could be moved to yield outcomes. And so this package of zoning code changes is what we've come up with to sort of reflect that. So it's any number of things, ADUs, other things that I won't get into. You can certainly go through that. The third strategy relates to Proposition 123. So most of you are probably familiar with that. Substantial funding opportunities coming from the state and the income tax set aside starting next year. So this sort of bucket of actions is very funding heavy in terms of ways we could leverage that opportunity with our own Louisville specific set of policies, fees, things like that. So that's Proposition 123 focused. The fourth strategy is also kind of zoning code heavy. A lot of this stuff overlaps, right? We've just sort of tried to organize it in a clean way. But strategy 4 is zoning code heavy as well, but it's more focused on predictability is how I'm thinking about this one. How can we possibly look at rule changes that create a more predictable regulatory environment so we don't have as much possibly of the discretionary review, public hearings, all the things that create challenges and unpredictability for developers for the right types of housing products, right? This isn't an across-the-board thing. So that's one strategy, and again, these are for discussion. We want to hear your feedback, and this will inform the drafting. So that's one strategy, looking at predictability. And the next one relates to infill development, so basically having more flexibility with infill development. Those are some of the most challenging sites, right? That have the most layers of regulations. What are some specific levers within that sort of bucket that we could address to promote more housing choices, more housing affordability? Let's see, am I on the 5th one? Yeah. The 6th one, last but not least, naturally occurring affordable housing. So that's, we've heard a lot about that. I think a couple of you mentioned it tonight as well. That's its kind of sort of unique animal, and there's a number of programs and opportunities to address that. Looking at basically where this is non-deed restricted, right? Where the market has actually somehow given us naturally occurring affordable, whether that's aging multifamily complexes or manufactured home parks. It's an existing asset. How can we enhance it, preserve it? And so these actions are sort of calibrated around that. So that's the high level of this document itself, and I know it's a lot to process, but again, the The hope, the thought from staff tonight at least, and our team is for you to look at this list. Certainly let us know if you have questions about any of these items or want to dive into any of them specifically, but if there's anything missing, one, and then two, which of these sort of resonate with you, then three, other information you might need to evaluate these. So I'll leave it at that and stay up here. Our consultant is still on for in the weeds questions about the strategies. I'm happy to answer any as well. Any other feedback or comments that you have, looking forward to it.
Great, thanks. So it was things we liked, things that we thought were missing. What was the third question that was, it was a bullet point in the packet?
Yeah, so what's missing? Which ones do you like the most? What more information might you need to understand these things, or would you like to see more clearly spelled out when we like sort of flesh these out?
Great, thanks. So if we can all try to keep our thoughts surrounding those. Free-form discussion.
Can I? Oh.
Sure, Commissioner Moline.
I just have one kind of, I guess, lead-off question, Jeff, and that is, like, if it's hard, it's very tempting to say, well, we should be doing all of these things, you know, we should, and we should be doing each of them in kind of I guess, sort of a strategic pattern. I guess what I'm looking for is, do you want to hear from us, like, let's do all the policy changes, or let's prioritize those first. Those should be easy. Or I guess I'm trying to get at what's kind of realistic for the town to take on at kind of one time, or between now and the end of the comprehensive planning update period. Or I don't know. Do you have thoughts about that? I mean, it's not really. I mean, I'd love to do all these, and to do them all now.
Can I make one comment
Please.
on that before you answer, Jeff? I think one of the questions that I had that may be touching on the intent of your comment, you know, with 6 strategies and 29 actions embedded within those strategies, my question on the what more information do you need is along the lines of, you know, where is the juice worth the squeeze in these, right? So 6 strategies, we need 2487 new housing units in the next 25 years. You know, are they the same? You know, does each one of those strategies each get us 629 housing units? Or, you know, is number 1 80% of that goal? Is number 2 20% of that goal, right? That's kind of what I hear you saying, and what I'm wondering as well, you know, which one of these strategies is most impactful?
Yeah, it's a great comment, and I think, you know, one of the ways this will be organized when you see the actual plan, hopefully toward the end of this year, is by sort of like a lot of these categories, right? Level of effort, level of resource, bang for the buck, juice for the squeeze kind of thing. I think that's what you're getting at, and it's good sort of guidance for us is to put it through that lens, because, yeah, of course, 29 things, we'd like to do all of them, but which ones would actually, there's like a calibration of resource level to the juice is worth the squeeze is the best way to, yeah. So I think we can help clarify that. I don't have an answer for, I think that's what the kind of feedback we hope for is, like, which of these resonate? Maybe we can sort of like make it a little bit more concise, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I guess actually stepping back even further from that, I'm sure that within the community there are those who reject the notion that we need any additional units whatsoever. And so I see this tool of looking at projected growth within the county, looking at our potential share of that. And so is there any other way to approach the issue that doesn't rely on the assumption that we need to accommodate this number?
Yeah. Go ahead, Rob.
So I'm going to say no. I mean, I think I'm just going to say no. I think that's the way kind of the community's been looking at it for the last few years, the time I've been here, which is, 2016, and you can see how the growth, our policies have aligned with, I mean, we've seen the result of our policies, which is that there's been declining population growth, very slow to no new housing growth. Can a city continue that? Can that be a legitimate way the city wants to have its future? Yes, I think that's the question. I mean, I think that's the statement back. If our city decides we want to be a zero growth, I think the state might intervene, by the way, and not allow that to happen. But if a community could continue to have kind of the land use policies that we've had, and we'll have a similar projection. Unless the state intervenes. I think it's a question back to the community and you and the city council is, do you want to see kind of a different type of community? Again, if you look at that decade by decade graph and then you actually project the projection numbers, it doesn't look that scary when you're looking at the whole like 50, 60-year history of the city. Or, like the amount of growth that occurred between 1970 and 1990 to 2000 or wherever that stopped. And what we're talking about with this plan is very small compared to that transformative growth over those couple of decades. Right. So then you have, does the community want to try to achieve? And I think to the question of, can you do all 29 of those? No, but you also can't do 1 or 2 or 3. Like, in order for us to be successful, we're going to have to try to do a lot of them because they're all not going to, all of them are going to pan out. Some of them, we can't predict what'll be as successful as others. But so we have to set things in place because we don't know what opportunities are going to come to us.
Right. All right, great, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, jumping back in. Things that people resonated with that you want to learn more about? Oh, Commissioner Krantz, yes, please. Thank you. Just a minute, Commissioner Krantz, we're going to bounce the mic back to you.
Sure.
There we go.
To me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I had the same question. I felt like the real meat of that of the draft housing needs assessment was in that one section that predicted how much growth we needed. And I don't feel like the justification for that, just saying that we need to absorb our share of the surrounding area's growth, necessarily means that that's how, it's a chicken and egg thing. We don't necessarily want to set that as our goal so that we can absorb it. If we decide what our goal is and then we can decide how much we want to absorb of the projected growth. I mean, so I would wonder, I just question before we throw strategies before we throw out strategies that we all agree upon the goal. And I wondered if the goal could be more focused on our need for a more diversified housing, especially if our goal is, I didn't see in that section how we're going to meet the 12% goal. I mean, I saw that number of 1,000, I don't have it on my screen while I'm looking, but there was about half of the new houses that we need, if we're going to grow, are going to have to be affordable houses. So what if we presumed that we only needed to grow in the affordable area, only needed to grow with affordable housing? Then we would have less growth and we'd be closer to meeting our 12% goal.
Director Zucchero, did you want to?
Yeah, I think, so I think I'm hearing there's some like structural, some structural discussion that you all want to have, which I think we actually weren't anticipating fully. I think I think what we were hoping for, and we can have this discussion, if that's what's most helpful. But I think with the strategies themselves, whether you're trying to achieve, let me back up a little bit. When we put the population numbers out there, and I think we've tried to say it again and again, is we're not trying to achieve that many units necessarily. We're trying to achieve diversity of housing, like Commissioner Krantz is saying, whether it's we do 500 new units in the next 10 years or we do 5,000 units in the next 10 years. The idea is that we want to be a more inclusive community. We want to have housing for families. We want to have housing for more income types. And so we've provided you strategies that our consultants and staff think could help us achieve that. And so, I don't think setting aside a population target, the state's actually intervening and saying cities can't set no growth targets. I'm guessing a low growth target might fall into that category too. Those might actually be illegal. I think the region's going to grow and will grow as much as fits within our community character and as city council allows.
Right, which is a lot of leeway there. Fits within community character and city council allows. I mean, even without having a stated no growth policy, you can enact plenty of laws that create a no growth policy, so.
Yeah, like, so for example, the city can change, like we can change our inclusionary zoning ordinance. So one of the strategies in there is like, we adopted this inclusionary ordinance with this 12%. We don't have any incentives in there. Most cities that are successful with inclusionary housing have density incentives, parking, and like different incentives that say, we'll give us 15% and we'll give you something to make your project more viable or attractive to the developers. So we have those types of strategies in there. There's a commercial linkage fee where we could get more money to help develop affordable housing. Or acquire, to Commissioner Krantz, like maybe we use that to acquire existing housing and deed restrict it rather than building new. So there's lots of different ways. Like, is there anything in there that you see that, no, we shouldn't do that? That's an inappropriate policy for us to do, or, that might actually work or achieve some of the goals.
Great, thanks. And then just as a point of order amongst the commission here, 9:30. This doesn't feel like a 15-minute conversation by any means. I don't know what other people are feeling.
I think I can summarize my thoughts in the next 4 hours, so that won't take too long. I can start now if you'd like me to.
Thank you. So how much does it throw you all off if we continue to next month?
So I think we're going to continue, we want to continue developing the plan. To be honest, we're on a really short time frame because we've got the comprehensive plan on the heels of this. And so I understand there's a balance here. I don't know if you all want to, we could definitely bring it up at the next meeting. We might have more plan development, but the same strategies are going to be there and you can still have the same comments. So maybe if you're okay with it, we'll continue to develop the draft plan. And continue the conversation on each of these strategies with all of you.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Is there a way that we could provide you written comments in the interim?
Yeah, you could all provide individual comments. Certainly don't email the whole commission.
Right, okay.
Because of open meetings laws, but you can email staff your individual comments. That would actually be really helpful.
Okay.
If you all have time to do that.
So on this discussion of point of order, how's this side of the table feeling? 4 hours is enough for you also, each of you?
I have no shortage of opinions, so,
That's why we're all here.
Right.
It's a good thing, yes. So.
But I can also provide my comments written to Director Zaccaro and Manager Hurd.
Commissioner Basket, are you feeling okay with, Commissioner Osterman, So maybe if anybody has any highlights that they wanted to, go ahead.
Or I think maybe even anything that you want more information on or you feel needs more explanation, maybe we just jump to that because that's something that we can continue to work on.
I can provide some feedback on that. I have some statements prepared for that. The things that would help me understand these, some of your numbers, I think that the 2,483 need for those units is valuable to me, but it doesn't put in perspective as to what the existing unit base is, so I'd like it as a percentage. My rough calculations, I would guess there's about over 8,000 existing units. If that's true, then that means that we have about a 30% increase to make. Well, I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that would help me and maybe other people understand, is that achievable or not? And that goes back to maybe somewhat some of the other Commissioner's comments. If it's a 30% increase, wait a second, we just can't do that. You can't increase the housing by 30%. We don't have that land mass. So that would be a number that would help me put that in perspective. The other thing would be to define affordable housing. I think that's an oxymoron in a lot of people's vocabulary. And to go deeper than that, determine who do we want to target for this diversified housing. And I like that term, the diversified housing, because I think that means a lot more than affordable housing. Now, if you're looking for families, maybe you work the other direction. Instead of getting demographics from Louisville, think about here's what the average family with 2 kids or whatever is making, and how much that would be to have a house. Now you're thinking about affordable housing for a specific demographic. Or if you want whatever demographic you're looking for, someone who works at a restaurant, or you can look at what their salary would be, what they can afford, so they're not taxed too much for the affordability of the house. And then the next question is that feasible? Right? So that would help me understand who we're actually targeting. And then the hot topic button, for me, the fee in lieu. We've talked about this as a valuable tool to increase affordable or just diversified housing. How can we use that money, and what of these benefits are available? Not benefits, what you were just talking about, Director Zaccaro. What can we do as a city to give people the option to move in if they can't afford it? Can we give them tax credits or whatever it is to use that fee in lieu, or create housing? So I guess that comes down the line with solutions. Those are the things that would help me digest these numbers a little bit more.
Can I add on that, Chair?
Please,
Just
yeah.
a couple of quick little things. So the couple of things that you said were very pertinent in terms of how I was reading some of the strategies, and admittedly, I did not read through the entire report before tonight's meeting, but I can get to that point, and if some of these questions that I'm asking are embedded in here, then I'll find them. But to your question, right, understanding that it's not a goal, right, but it is potentially a need or a capacity question based on trends, right? That's a projection. So if the projection actually comes true, that's what we're going to need to support that growth. The first strategy, that is identify the areas for residential development, is very aligned with, I think, some of the things you were saying. Do we even have the capability to develop that capacity to meet that demand in the municipal boundaries of Louisville? And if we do, what does that look like in terms of an exchange of currently zoned commercial yet vacant to residential? And I know that's not an easy thing to say, we need this many acres, because are we talking single family homes? Are we talking about multifamily residential? Are we talking about mixed use development? All of those things come into play, right? And so however those kind of nebulous ideas could be somewhat quantified. Yes, we have this much area, but it would mean we would lose this much area of this zoning, or we would have to convert this, or we'd have to get this from the county, or those types of things would help digest that. And I think that goes to that first strategy, which does resonate with me. Identify the areas, right? Because before we really think about implementing any strategy, we have to know what we have to work with. And so that's something that kind of jives with me in terms of what you were saying, as well as the strategy, as just one quick note.
Thanks. Commissioner Krantz.
Thanks. Yeah, these are all such good questions, and I love that we're just getting a chance to ask questions first, and we could submit our answers in writing. To what Commissioner Choi just said, I just wanted to verify one thing, is that if we're looking at that strategy number 1 to decide which areas we can rezone from commercial or a commercial industrial to residential, I take it that means that we have tabled all discussion of the previous inclusionary housing ordinance to create a requirement for rezoning, because I don't see anything of that in the plan or in the strategy. So I just wanted to verify that, if we could verify that we've decided to table that and that's never going to go to council, then I can move on from that. And I have another question too. And my other question is, would it be possible to do some sort of a financial analysis as to how what the effect would be on our city budget if we were to increase our population to the target that was set by this housing needs assessment? I'm just wondering, because we would have to have more amenities, and may have to have a different tax structure if we don't have the commercial coinciding with this increase in housing. So my question is, what would be the thresholds for requiring additions to the rec center, additions to our water treatment or sewage treatment plants, and adding one police officer and things like that? Could we get some idea of what those thresholds are?
Can I get clarification on your first question? I didn't understand
sure.
that.
Oh, my first question was about the inclusionary housing ordinance that came before us over a year ago, just before we had this study. We said we tabled the discussion of having a 30% affordable housing
okay, yeah.
requirement for rezoning. And I was just wondering if we've completely given up on that by what I'm reading with strategy number 1.
No, if I can maybe just answer that quickly. So,
Oh,
I mean,
sure.
yeah, so no, I mean, that proposal was not followed through with because it didn't have appropriate study to understand if that number would actually inhibit or actually serve as an incentive. So we actually, when we hired these consultants, that was one of the very pointed things we asked them to do, which Jeff alluded to, is we had them do pro forma analysis of prototype housing developments to say, okay, where's that Goldilocks spot of incentives that makes it financially feasible still, so that the developers will be incentivized, but not too much too, So I think we have some pretty good data to suggest what inclusionary incentives would be. So that, and I think it's very likely that that would be one of the priority initiatives that could come out of this plan. We spent a lot of time trying to think about that, how to create a better inclusionary ordinance.
And Rob, I'll just add that a summary of that analysis is will be included in the plan, so you can see the results of it and all the data behind it.
And I would just add to the economic analysis, so the city, so you can't fiscally zone the city for commercial, because you get a lot of tax potentially from sales tax generating commercial, but if it's not market supported, you're not going to get it. It actually has a negative economic impact if you've overly fiscally zoned your city for commercial. So having vital corridors and areas of town that can support places that people want to be, where businesses want to be. That's also part of, so it's not as easy as running our fiscal impact model to determine how to have the best economic impact and to be able to afford city services. It's a complex equation that I would just suggest can't be fully answered just by running our fiscal impact model.
Thanks for clarifying that. With 3 minutes left, do we have any high-level observations that people wanted to make along the lines of the 3 questions that were posed? What you like, what's missing, and knowing that we can individually submit comments? Is there anything else? All right. Then I sense we're ready perhaps to move on. I wish we had more time. With that, then, we have nothing scheduled for future meetings. Do we have any other planning commission comments? It seems this is a quiet group on those ones. Anything people want to announce? Yes.
You asked for planning commission comments.
Please, yeah.
I just wanted to note that council did not pass the dark sky ordinance. And a variety of reasons, I watched the whole meeting and found it to be very interesting discussion. My point in bringing it up is that I feel like we need better communication with council to understand what it is they're looking for from us as we go into these two important projects with the housing needs assessment and the comprehensive plan. I would not want to spin our wheels, so I'm not sure how we get that engagement, but I don't feel confident that I understand what council expects from us. Thank you.
Well, thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, let's discuss further, see what we can figure out. Any additional planning commission comments? All right, then motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.